So this is the Fiat Fullback, a beefy pickup truck related to the mighty Mitsubishi L200. Now I know at first glance I'm not the most obvious person to review a twin cab workhorse like this, but I come from a family who have a fondness for this type of vehicle, and we've owned everything from VW pickups to a Ford F-150. So let's see how this one shapes up. The Fullback shares its mechanics and body structure with the Mitsubishi and differs in just the cosmetic detail, trim and standard equipment, which will come as good news to many buyers, as the L200 is proven and well liked. Fiat has made sure the Fullback has plenty of showroom appeal, and this more distinctive cross model takes things one step further, with a matte black sport bar in the load area, a new grille, large side steps, black alloy wheels with off-road tyres and a distinctive silver front skid plate. Now the market for pickups here in the UK is more buoyant than ever, and they're no longer just the preserve of workmen and builders. In fact, the Fullback has been admired by several of my mum friends who quite like the crossover style looks, together with the practicality that that rugby-inspired name offers. So if you're considering this as an alternative to an SUV, here's a few things that you may want to consider. You may find that you miss having a boot with a handy tailgate to shelter under when you're loading up. And as the load area is completely separate from the passenger compartment, you won't be able to keep an eye on your cargo. So it's not actually that ideal for carrying the family dog. And unless you're going to invest in a lockable box or perhaps a hardtop, there's nothing in the way of security. Whilst the weekly shopping is going to have to be consigned to the back seat on a rainy day like today. But when it comes to practicality, just take a look at this. Now that's what I call a load area, 1.4 metres. It will apparently carry a Euro pallet, which doesn't mean an awful lot to me. But what I do like the idea of is being able to throw muddy bikes and sports equipment and dirty wellies into the back of that without you having to worry about it messing up the car's interior. Now, one thing to think about if you are going to invest in a hardtop is it's going to have to weigh less than 45 kilos in order for you to maintain the 1-ton payload that you need to benefit from the company car tax breaks that makes a vehicle like this so appealing. In the front, well, you won't find much in the way of storage, with a small glove box, small door bins and this small compartment in between the seats. But you do get generous levels of equipment with air conditioning, DAB digital radio, cruise control and central locking as standard on all models. And of course you get extras the further you go up the range. It does feel fairly comfortable in here, with good headroom, a comfortable seat with lots of adjustment, and you get this really nice elevated driving position. But I do have some pretty big gripes about the quality and just the general appearance. It all feels a bit flung together. And some of the materials that are used, the quality just doesn't feel good enough. There's lots of scratchy hard plastics and things like this really nasty little plastic cover that goes over one of the storage compartments. And it's a similar story out here with the side step, which just feels really quite flimsy. It doesn't feel like it could cope with the rigours of family life, let alone with this being used as a workhorse every single day. While we're on the subject of family life, let's get into the back, because it strikes me that the back is really best suited to families, to children. I'm only 5'4" and my head is really almost up against the headlining, but taller adults are going to find themselves really pushed up against the roof. And also, if you are taller, you can't properly see out of the windows unless you sort of slouch down, which isn't the ideal position to be sitting in. The other thing is that the seats themselves are quite uncomfortable and have a very upright back. However, having said that, it's nice and wide, and you do get a couple of Isofix child seat points, one on either side, along with a good sized door bin. The best news about the way the Fullback drives is its powerful engines. Both models use a 2.4 litre diesel tuned to give different outputs, and both are respectively quiet, even when idling, with any diesel clatter fading into the background when you're travelling at the motorway or at speed. Now, if you opt for the manual gearbox, you'll find it smooth and quite pleasant to use. However, this has the 5-speed automatic box, which feels old-fashioned and quite sluggish. Now, of course, the height of the Fullback means this is never going to hug the road like a sporty crossover. However, cornering really isn't as wobbly as you might imagine. Look, I'm not going to over-enthuse about its road holding, but I have been pleasantly surprised by the sharpness of the steering, which really isn't too ponderous at all. Of course,
An SUV is going to corner better and you'll get a smoother ride, but this genuinely is far more enjoyable to drive than I was expecting. Although I do need to point out one fairly major flaw, which is the setup of the suspension. It makes things really pretty bouncy over a pothole-filled country road, particularly for anyone who happens to be travelling in the back.
The SX models have a 3-position switch to choose between high ratio 2-wheel drive and high or low ratio 4-wheel drive, while the LX models get the super select 4-wheel drive setup you'll find in the Mitsubishi Shogun. This gives you a locking centre differential that can improve traction on really tricky surfaces, as well as the usual 2- or 4-wheel drive options.
You know, I can absolutely see the appeal of pickup trucks like this. As I said at the start, I've got a bit of a soft spot for them. But unfortunately, I've driven better ones, and I just don't know if the Fiat Fullback has the reputation or the overall polish to justify the fact that this is more expensive than its rivals.